Hello, Rake. Can you hear me?
Yep. Hello,
Cool.
Claire.
Hello. Good to speak at last.
Yeah. Thanks very much for introducing me to this platform because I've literally just downloaded the app. I've heard of it, but I've never used it.
Oh, right. Yeah, I guess I'm a refugee from YouTube after they um, closed down my primary channel.
What have you been up to? I'd love to just give me a little bit of bio, will you? Because I don't have any context for you whatsoever.
You haven't Googled me?
I haven't taken extreme interest in you. Sorry.
Oh, that's
You
okay.
intrigue me. I'm
It's just that
mildly intrigued, but I'm not. I haven't stalked you.
okay.
Well, actually,
Um,
I did when I googled you. It was, I think it was more than a year ago, and I can't remember all the. There were some results. I'm a bit dubious about those kinds of results. I'd rather hear
yeah,
you.
I suppose you could say that I was active in nationalism, having been a former member of the BNP.
Blimey, blimey.
That didn't come out, did it? I was featured in Hope Not Hate quite a few
Crikey.
times.
Did you aspire to be a political figure at one point?
Well, I mean, I've always been interested in politics, and I basically accepted invitations, and I was invited to join. And I guess I've never looked back since because it was, very revealing um,
Of
and really I'm
revealing of.
of the culture of the different political parties. They are basically political tribes with very different political cultures. UKIP, BNP, they're all different. And
So what would have turned you on to politics in the first instance?
I guess I was always interested in politics, in that I wanted to solve problems. So, I guess since I was a child, and hear problems, and, I, I would say, why don't they do this? Why don't they do that? And
So
um,
you are. So it's more like from the policy side of things. You thought you were having creative policy ideas, and then you thought a party might be the place where they might potentially get implemented or listened to.
well, you have to get yourself into government, and in the way democracy operates, you have to get yourself into a party in order to get yourself elected and in office. And then I realized that they're not really in
Can I
charge.
can I quickly say why I didn't get interested in politics, and then tell you how I got interested, just to answer back, so it's a conversation.
Oh, sure, yes.
Um, I come from an engineering background, so my father was an aircraft engineer, and there's a
Hmm.
kind of ethos associated with engineering, which is
Hmm.
towards always being on the lookout for reality and the mismatch or the misapprehensions you might have. It's overall, I would say you need to adopt a humility and a regard for the truth.
Mm.
And I think that politics, growing up and watching the political class behaving like salesmen, especially after the Clinton era, yeah, it's almost the polar opposite of engineering. So I wanted nothing to do with politics, and as far as possible, I saw it as a seedy, kind of almost a degenerate sort of activity, which I wanted to keep out of. And then went into my career, and after having my children and so on, I got kind of run over because I didn't realize that you can't ignore the political reality, because of what you said initially. You said politics is about tribalism, and that was the bit that I didn't understand. I thought it was about opinions and posturing for power and all the rest of it. But now having got run over by being willfully, ignorant. What was it? Someone tweeted yesterday. You may not take care of, you may not care about politics, but it certainly cares about, takes an interest in you.
Yes.
So
And,
yeah,
and talking about engineering, I've come to the conclusion that it is um, really an essential service because sewage treatment works is an essential service, is it not?
right, right.
I
Oh, it's
mean,
all over. All of
it is
the
a dirty
modern
business. And,
getting fuel is a hell of an engineering proposition.
mm, and if we disregard reality, we're going to crash and burn. I mean, reality and truth are sacred,
But don't you think
because
it's
it matters whether it's safe or not safe to do a certain thing.
exactly? If you're the chief engineer, like my father was, you had to certify, you had to sign on the piece of paper that a plane was safe, and all of the crew were in your hands after that. So you had to know, you had to have things as simple as possible and as honest as possible, and you had to have honest appraisals of things. But I got whacked by the politics of offshoring and things like that. So I had a stable career as an information, a sort of a technologist, and we're famously kind of politically independent, or we used to be. But getting blammoed by the offshoring thing, literally losing my family home over it, is one quick way to drop you into that boiling political fucking hot water, which was all around. I was oblivious to, and I never will be oblivious again, and I'll never, I'll never cross the road blindfolded ever again.
What is the offshoring thing you're talking about?
Around about 2002, the New Labour project pretty much decided to just dismantle or sell our IT industry abroad to India. And one of the big deliverables of that is Rishi Sunak himself. You look at the family they come from, all these enormous contracts that were awarded to India. IBM became Indian business machines. They put 11 billion in. I can't remember the year. I think it might have been right at the end of the 90s. They made the largest inward investment into India. And Bangalore went from being like a quiet village to where it is today. It takes more than an hour to cross the city. It's got undergone enormous development, and they transferred a huge amount of jobs, of engineering, high-tech jobs, away from America
Just
and the UK.
because they're cheaper.
Yes, because you could get 6 for 1 when it started.
Yeah. The thing is, I was trying to explain to people yesterday that, the peculiarity of white people is that they haven't got a working class. And because they destroyed their manufacturing base during the Thatcher years, right? And then they started replacing everything, because if you think of yourself as a body politic and you haven't got a working class, it means you haven't got any limbs and arms. And then, of course, they'll be importing labor to replace you. And then they'll think, well, we've got so many of them already. Let's just replace, our middle classes with, Bangaloreans and other people. And that's what they've done. And it's not just this country; it's America, because the Apple factory is not in America but in China.
Hold on a minute. You're saying that this the offshoring that I encountered was like a rising water level, which started in the 70s with a deindustrialization program.
Yes.
Well, certainly there was a lot more deindustrialization under New Labour than under Thatcher, I believe. Could be wrong.
Well, it started with her, right? She was privatizing everything to create a new, middle class, selling council homes.
But how did that? Tell me how the manufacturing was whacked.
Well, the miners' strike, and all the inefficient manufacturing industries in the UK. They were closed down, or they were moved abroad, right? And I remember Harold Macmillan, Lord Macmillan, saying, "You're selling off the family silver, Maggie," and she ignored it. There were lots of things going on that I didn't realise until after she was dead, really. But she literally was selling off the family silver.
Do you think then, because a lot of what people describe is my audio all right, by the way?
I'm hearing you loud and clear.
All right, cool. Let me just check my microphone. It's on standard mode. Yeah. I heard that the 70s were quite a socialistic period before the Thatcher came in with that landslide. The country was a little bit like it is today. It was overtaxed and underproductive, and we got ourselves into a huge debt.
Yeah, income tax was something ridiculous, like what 90% or something, and there were all
Right.
these, tax exiles and wildcat strikes and miners' strikes and 3-day week and um,
Yeah.
you know,
So what was going on there? There was an aggrandizement of the social sector. The unions in the car industries and everywhere else were aggrandizing, becoming almost gangster outfits. Is that right?
yes, yes, and you know, uh, you may know that I promote a one-party state because I'm saying there's, I'll just lay it on the
You
line, in
just
case.
say that out. It's really
Yeah,
brilliant.
yeah, yeah, because it's just easier that way because I think that there is a structural problem in representative democracy, in that you divide people into these classes, and I'm saying that there's nothing inherently virtuous about being born middle class or being born working class. So why do you make them fight each other? It's an unnecessary division, and really. There should be only one political party governing in the national interest and prepared to consider whether what policies are or are not in the national interest, and that's how it should be
It's
done.
funny.
But
It's
but
funny how
nobody ever
that.
talks about the national interest
It's funny how saying something as simple and commonsensical like that can cause so much outrage.
because
Isn't
it's
it?
being banned. Truth,
Yeah.
logic, and morality are being banned,
I've
and
only
then we'll
finally,
soon be forced to repeat nonsense.
I've only just in the recent months come to the idea that democracy itself is just another subversion, along with others, to be taken as dubiously as communism or any other
Well,
silly,
well,
silly way of.
yes, yes, because it's crazy when you think about the history of democracy in ancient Athens. It only worked for about 80 years, I believe.
Hmm.
Athenian democracy only worked for about 80 years.
What
And
followed it up
basically,
then? Because I mean, I remember that just prior to the invention of democracy, the ruling elite were worried about being murdered in their beds. So in the end, they were forced to enfranchise more people, let's say. But it was not a democracy as we'd recognise today. It was only for a handful of very thoroughly invested people, propertied people, magnates, effectively.
yeah, well, the slaves didn't get a vote, the women didn't get a vote, but there was
Exactly.
no secret ballot. So what happened to Athens in the end was that they kept voting for war because the men were shamed to not vote for war because I guess
Oh,
they would be accused of being unmanly and traitors, etc. So they found themselves raising their arm when they were asked if they wanted to continue the war, and basically they destroyed themselves. And then in the end, Rome just you know walked in and took over after Sparta and Athens exhausted themselves in war. And I think the same thing happened to the Europeans in World War I and World War II. What the hell was that all about? You know, it, we already know you don't like Jews, and there's just centuries of history of Christian Europeans hating Jews, and the British actually kicked them out in 1290 under the edict of
yeah.
expulsion. It's like, ooh, the Nazis, they didn't like Jews. How terrible. I mean, how terribly hypocritical is really, how it's
It's
been.
it's it. I'm level 36 anti-Semite. I don't know what level you are. I imagine you're not a beginner on the junior slopes of anti-Semitism.
I've been accused of philo-Semitism, but that would be
Philo-Semitism.
unfair. Yes, yes, because
Philo-Semitism.
I'm saying they are part of the solution as well as being part of the problem. Because basically, they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. But then hell, neither are the Muslims. They all just pretend. They're basically hypocrites pretending to be Jewish and Christian and Muslim, and they don't follow their religion, or they cherry pick. They just obey the bits that are easy and the ones that they like. But the most important thing about the Abrahamic religions is idolatry. But nobody talks about that. But people look at you funny. Why are you going on about idolatry like you really believed in it? And I thought, well, it's in the Ten Commandments, right?
Is it
And
in the
it's
dogma that women shouldn't be as vocal as people like you? I mean, you are a woman, aren't you, Claire?
Well, there is a verse in the New Testament saying women should be silent in church. So, but actually, everybody is silent in church apart from the priest who, gets it, climbs into the pulpit and preaches at the congregation.
There
But
seems
I
to
mean,
be a
saying,
natural misogyny, which we've moved away from a naturalized misogyny, haven't we, as well?
well, I mean, today I was just saying that um, that men cannot say no to immoral women, and that is their problem. It's like men can't say no to no string sex. They just can't say no. And if you say it's okay for women to offer men no string sex, then your civilization will decline and fall. And it's happened to previous, empires too.
So, as well as the democracy of subversion, the enfranchisement, the aggrandizement of feminine power is ultimately a subversion as well.
Well, I mean, all the traditional all the Abrahamic religions, are very mindful of feminine powers to say, don't show them your tits, you know, cover your bosom, with a veil, cover your hair, which is part of your beauty, and then they go to the complete extreme of the burqa because, and even then, I guess a really horny man will think, a burqa, that means it's a woman. Wow, I'm aroused. I must go after her because it's a woman under all that.
There is a sizable contingent of the male species who, are attracted by the mere idea of a woman. Yeah, it's true. It's true. But does the burqa go back a long way? Are they posing when they're wearing the burqa, or is it really an ancient tradition?
I don't know, but uh, uh, I think they just distorted a verse in the Quran because Muhammad has had all his wives whom he really wasn't even having sex with because they were basically the widows of his companions and he couldn't, he didn't know what to do with them. So I guess he married them to give them the status because, you can't just make the widow of your companion, your housekeeper, your maid. So, but well, apparently he only had sex with Aisha and ignored the others. But anyway, obviously, if you're the wife of the Prophet of Muhammad, then everybody wants a slice of your ass, figuratively, and probably literally. So there was this verse that says the wives of the Prophet should only speak to men behind a curtain, and then I don't know, somehow it got translated into they must wear curtains as they go about their business. And then it became to we aspire to be the wives of Muhammad, so we're all going to walk around in curtains. But in probably the same way that nuns are said to be the brides of Jesus, of Christ, right?
Mm.
But because they and but there are all these sort of strange metaphors. So the church is supposed to be the bride of Christ as well, and then you discover that Jews are supposed to be the brides of God,
Okay.
and further metaphors are made of Jews being the openly adulterous bride, wife of God, whom
Okay.
apparently he will take back, even if they sell themselves to passers-by under shady trees as prostitutes. So it's all very odd. But anyway,
Why
I
did you
mean,
get interested in the Quran then? Did you take that on, the burden of trying to get to grips with it?
um, well, I mean, I've ended up um, investigating the theology of all the three Abrahamic religions. Because I guess I'm interested in the structure of religion, of how they are, their main ingredients, basically. I mean, I could write a consumer's guide to religion, but I can't tell you how you're going to get your money back if it crashes and burns if you use the wrong one.
Well,
But
I mean, there's a geographical component and a temperamental component. I mean, the Middle East is a different place and a different mindset. I noticed when I traveled to India, I've been there a couple of times, the mindset difference is huge. So the
what would
religions
you
are bound
say
to.
was the main difference in the Indian mindset?
Oh, it's a whole different evolutionary journey to get to become an Indian, I think. So their holy books are going to speak to them as a people on their frequency. I just think it's such a shame that in Europe we had quite a lot of piety. I mean, Julius Caesar was pretty pious, Pontifex Maximus. We had a pious pagan tradition in Europe at one point.
Well, I suppose I get a little frustrated when you have all these white nationals saying, why don't we return to our pre-Christian pagan gods? It's like there was a reason why they were superseded by Christianity. They didn't just sort of willingly fade away.
Can I give
And
you my
actually,
theory on that?
go on.
I don't know if it sounds absurd to you, but I read Crowley. He's my main guru for trying to get an Edwardian class education, which I have no chance of getting. But it was incredible at one point, wasn't it, in England? Probably peaked in 1870. But as a guru, he's a terrific reference into all sorts of arcana, and one of which is the idea that Christianity is actually Paulianity. If you look at it, he was the architect of most of the institution of Christianity. And what he did, the miracle of him forming these churches so rapidly, those early churches, was by going around to former colonies, you could call them Epicurean communities. They were sort of off-grid hippies who were looking for the good life.
Oh, you mean the Corinthians and Philippians, Colossians,
Yes,
Galatians,
yes,
Corinthians
yes.
and Romans? Right. Yeah.
Well,
He wrote
but those
letters to them.
communities were pagan communities who were out of the tax jurisdiction. He was a former tax collector who apparently had turned his back on tax collecting, and yet somehow had managed to rope in and enfranchise lots of new tax jurisdictions.
Well, I think Paul just made a marketing decision. Paul of Tarsus was a Jew who
Yes.
worked for the Roman Empire, and he probably realized that the Jews were too protected from the idea of worshipping a man. It's like, because there is a verse in Deuteronomy chapter 13 saying, any man who claims to be divine, kill him. So
Right.
because they have the benefit of that, the Jews will just poo-poo any man claiming to be God. But as for Gentiles, that they didn't have that protection, and also Greco-Roman culture was full of stories of Zeus coming down from Mount Olympus to impregnate, seduce, and rape mortal women and sire semi-divine offspring.
Right, and that's crucial. Because my theory of Paul could speak fluent Greek, so we don't know whether he was ethnically half Greek or something like that, but he could certainly speak and write in it. And the Greek current, as far as I'm aware, the best of the Greek pagan current was this idea of the divinity who was born, Dionysus being born from the thigh of Zeus. So it's this idea that human beings have something different from all other animals. We have initiative, we have this spark of, this factor X. For want of a better word, you could say it was a divine spark. And I think that was the communication that was trying to force its way east. And in the end, Paul managed to take and sort of mangle and turn around and create this Christian religion. It's almost a Dionysianism. What do you think of that?
I've heard of the oppositional pairing of Dionysianism, I think that's a word.
Yeah, sorry, I should say it.
Apollonianism,
Right.
and it's basically, Dionysus was about the emotions, right? The emotions.
It was about intoxication. It was divine intoxication. Divine intoxication, yes.
Indeed, and Apollo was meant to represent reason and engineering and sciences and all these rational ideas. So that there would always be this conflict. On the one hand, we want to be reasonable, but on the other hand, we want to get stoned and a little tipsy. And, So,
Exactly.
so there has to be a balance between the two.
But by introducing this or saying that there's a pathway to the divine that the human can access uniquely, it means that you can start to imagine worshipping a man. It's the beginning of the idea of the archetypal divine man, Christ, isn't it?
Yes, but then I mean, Jews will say, well, that's idolatry and it's forbidden, and the penalty for that is death.
Even though they have their own stories of one day a Messiah will come, it's always a becoming.
Well, that I suppose that would be the exception because it's the end times, and then if you talk to Jews, is it like, will it be in this world or in heaven, and they get a bit vague, and then I've got an answer that seems to be it will be in this world, but our free will be taken away from us, and we'll just be happy obeying all the prohibitions of God. So I don't think that's good enough. Um, and a lot of people think, well, I wouldn't like to be, deprived of my free will. And then there's another school of thought saying, well, if you're deprived of your free will, then you're depriving yourself of your humanity because you just become a robot and you do what you're programmed to do, and and you lose your status as a human being.
Exactly. Yeah. So how do you speak to that? The instinct that this spark of divinity is the justification for liberty, free will. You're on the side of oppressing free will in a sense with authority.
Well, I'm very keen on the law. So I'm saying liberty is what we ought to enjoy after all the necessary laws are in place. And then next sentence, Allah is the best libertarian of all because he knows what the necessary laws are for an orderly society, right?
Are you? Sorry, I'm interrupting you.
You were asking me. Were you about to ask me if I'm Muslim?
No, I was about to ask you whether you would be open-minded enough to be sort of ecumenical about all of this and see that Apollo actually the I think it was when you were talking about the Apollonian versus Dionysus, that might have been a Jungian kind of analysis thing. I don't know if he understood it the same way as me. I understand Apollo as just the same as your Allah. He's the same dude, same guy. Apollo was impossible to describe. He had no attributes. He was the all god. So it's not true that the pantheons had a fractured conception of God. They had Apollo, who was this god of all, but he had a kind of planetary viceroys, almost different departments, and they were projections.
But Zeus was king of the gods.
Yes, but much further down the chain. In the end, he's only the planet Jupiter, and he actually wanders, and you can see him with the naked eye. He moves around, but they're all in hoc to the solar Apollo, who is blazing with light. You can't even look at him because of his glory. And they weren't referring to the physical sun; they were referring to this. I'm sure it's the same notion.
Well, he had this chariot, didn't he?
Yes.
Wasn't it Apollo who had a chariot that
yes.
dragged the sun across the sky,
yes.
something like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the sun was his kind of there was this sort of avatar, but he wasn't the sun. He was I do believe he was this all notion, a total God. You can take that with opinion. You can. That's my opinion anyway. You can form your own.
Well, I mean, okay. According to Wikipedia, Apollo is one of the Olympian deities in classical Greek and Roman religion. So, just one of them.
It doesn't say he's the chief.
No, it's Zeus. Zeus is called the king of gods.
Yeah, I know. He's the lawmaker. He represents sort of number 4 in the numerological system. He's 4 square. Even St. Peter's in Rome which used to be the Jupiterian temple, is 4 square, and it's the lawmaking center. Jupiter was the lawgiver.
Yeah, because he's the final authority.
You think
Because I
that
mean, the
law is the
stories
ultimate
in
authority?
Homer, saying that the gods would take sides in human battles, right? And then they would fight it amongst each other, and Zeus would reluctantly come down from Mount Olympus to sort the mess out and have the final
Yes,
word on things.
to represent the correction with reality, to come in and upset everybody's. I mean, one thing we've noticed about humans is that we're very willing to adopt arbitrary systems of frameworks of belief, even if they are sometimes they can be very, very arbitrary. Like this net zero kind of framework that we can transition away from fuel. Everyone can just get on board with that, even if that is out of kilter with actual world, the actual physics of whether it's deliverable or not. You see what I mean? That would come down eventually.
It's become a new religion, and to
well,
question
eventually,
it is heresy.
Yes, and I mean, if you've got any science background, that this is a train wreck. That, I mean, you can see it coming a mile off. That this is a train that's going to crash. Well, when that crash happens, that's Zeus coming down and wreaking his revenge, sort of thing. That's when Zeus would intervene. That's how I see it.
Yes.
It's the reconciler back to the real.
Yes, I mean, I don't. I mean, I get it about the attractiveness of these Greek deities, but basically the Abrahamic God is one-stop shopping, right? It's like, yeah, we get the idea. Well, it is one-stop shopping.
So you find it a convenient God. You're quite happy with the choices you made. And,
well, the thing is, people like to be artistic. They like looking at statues and imagining, the Greek myth. They're quite good stories, right?
Oh, very good stories.
Yeah, so they appeal to the imagination, and they're beautifully represented in art, but fundamentally, even art is idolatry. But but as long as we understand why we like certain things, but for administrative reasons, we want a book of rules from the supreme authority of the universe. So nobody's going to go, oh, but so and so says the opposite. I'm just talking about administrative efficiency.
Why do you think that do you call it idolatry? Why is that so central to your sort of mission?
Because
raising awareness on this idolatry question.
Because fundamentally, if you're an idolater, you're saying you reject either the Torah, the Torah and the Quran. And really, if you think the whole thing through about which religion God would approve of, it's only Judaism and Islam, because they have the correct conception of God. So there's only two to choose from, basically. So everyone else, including Christianity, is idolatry. And then you're going to say, well, what is the harm of idolatry? And I'm saying, I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of opportunity cost.
Remind me. I've heard of it.
So it's an economic concept, a concept in economics saying you only have one of something. Your resources are finite, so you only have one property and one source of income, and you have to be careful how you spend it, because once you spent it, it's gone. So if you want to use your shop space to sell to open a hardware shop, you are paying the opportunity cost of being a butcher's, for example. And so you have to decide, which is going to be more profitable, because you only have finite resources. And we all have, a finite lifespan. And, it would make sense to just choose, the best, the best thing. But what I've noticed is that a lot of people make irrational decisions because they are neurotic, and they are neurotic because they can't face certain things about themselves. They haven't come to terms with their history, or they don't understand it, or they're, addicted to the seven deadly sins and they don't want to give it up, and have made a god of their appetites, which is an Islamic idea, a Quranic idea. So there are lots of unacknowledged reasons not to, change our mind about something. I mean, I've met so many people say, I'd rather die than, whatever you think is the correct course of action.
Yeah, I mean, do you just think that some other competing faiths are just inferior? Are you almost in a sort of supremacist idea then? You think objectively there's more literature, there's more available to you if you're in one of these Abrahamic faiths? That's where all the treasure lays.
Yes, because the Abrahamic God is the most powerful being conceivable. So, that's it. I mean, if you're going to worship a deity, why would you worship any lesser god? Why?
All right. Well, what is the objective of worship then?
You want protection. You want, you want this idea of perfect justice. So the Abrahamic God, didn't just do all those things. Apparently, the story is that he's perfectly moral, which is why he's capable of sending, people to hell and heaven, and punishing punishing evil and rewarding good. So that is the concept.
Claire worships regularly and gets benefits, and wishes more people would understand these benefits. And you're almost like a salesperson for. Are you an activist or?
Well, I am agnostic because I don't want to argue with people about whether God exists. I'm saying that there's obvious utility in this belief system.
Yes,
because
I think
if you did believe, then you would do certain things, even though you didn't get lifetime a lifetime reward. You would stick to your principles and even martyr yourself and give up your life because you believe X, Y, and Z to be true. But if you didn't really believe in anything, then you're very easy to threaten and bribe.
And don't you think Christians are also feel quite pious with their choice that they've made? And they're alarmed at the idea that they're actually idolatrous. So I mean, and what sort of reaction are you getting from Christians? Have you had conversations with Christians who are mightily offended by your stance?
Well, they can't. I've given them years to come up with an argument. I mean, actually, they've had centuries. They've had 1,644 years to come up with a better answer than the one they've come up with so far. So obviously, okay. The history of Christianity is that the subjects of absolute monarchs in Europe were not asked if they'd like a little bit of Christianity, try it to see if they liked it, and then have the whole thing. They were never consulted. I mean, obviously, the kings just listened to the Christian missionaries who said, "Hey king, hey barbarian king, you know where we come from, don't you? We come from the eternal city of Rome, and you, as a Briton, you were under the Roman conquest, and we come from that city who conquered you, so we know a thing or two.
Let's talk
and
about.
We'd like to help you with your government, and all you
Let's-
have to do is,
I like that. I like that idea. The forceful imposition of it. It's interesting. It's good to think about that. But look at the context of when Christianity was created. It came from the slaves as a cult, right? That's true. It only became a religion as a result of Constantine, largely his mother, going in search of the relic and so on, and building that first church. But I think it's an overlooked aspect of it is the 100 years prior, the Spartan rebellion. And I believe the context of that time was that slavery as an institution was blowing up all over the place here and there. It was a lot of it was quite an incendiary thing to do to enslave people. There's obviously some rebellious element to the human condition. Doesn't want to be in fealty to another person, a mere person. What do you think about that?
Well, the Romans didn't invent slavery.
No. It's part of the human institution going back as far as we could possibly remember.
Hmm.
But that Spartacan rebellion then was a momentous event. It can't just be brushed aside. I mean, even the put down was so severe. It was a massive a thorn in the side of the Roman Empire. The slave rebellions.
And they had to crush it with overwhelming force, and there was the Appian Way was lined with crucified
Exactly.
slaves
Exactly.
as a warning to others. Yes.
Well, I'm saying that it can't be a coincidence that 100 years later, the chief rebel is also crucified. All of it, and it kind of occludes that earlier mass crucifixion event, doesn't it?
I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're saying.
I'm saying that in a way, it's kind of surprising that we celebrate the martyrdom of one man when 100 years earlier there was miles and miles of martyred men, martyred slaves.
Oh, right. The
And I
revolting
see
slaves were punished.
yes, and having a crucifixion death was what the Romans considered to be a good, humiliating, low-class death. So there is echoes of the Spartacan rebellion in that. It was the same means of, the same method of execution.
Yes, because it was meant to be a lingering death.
Right. So it was reserved for slaves and for low-class criminals, for just a non-respected criminal.
Mm-hmm. Because it was a public spectacle.
And then if you combine the fact that so the manner of the death, and then the fact that the slaves were the ones that formed into the cult initially, it was pretty much a slave-only religion, was it not?
Yes. So Christianity has been described as a religion of women and slaves because they had to accept their lot, right?
Yes. And do you think the Muslim perspective does see it like that? Sees Christianity as effectively because when the Romans were able to grab hold of this cult and turn it into an organized faith, they did quell the slave rebellions ever more because they had found a mechanism which headed off rebellion. They had finally found the right answer. It wasn't the put down. What the slaves actually needed and required, they were church buildings and awe-inspiring cathedrals, and they needed to be awed rather than to live in a state of awe rather than fear. Is that fair?
I think that there was a difference in the operation of slavery in Greece, in ancient Greece and in ancient Rome, because the Roman slave had the right to manumission, but the Greek slave didn't.
Yes, I do like the fact that in Roman slavery, at least you might be able to stop being a slave, whereas in modern slavery, it's not acknowledged. It's not even acknowledged whether you are or you aren't a slave. But I think an employee today for a large corporation is pretty much the same guy as a slave in Rome.
Yeah, I mean, there were some, really, educated and highly skilled slaves.
Yeah.
There were, slave scribes who were probably, civil slaves rather than civil servants, as we call them, because obviously, you needed lots of scribes to write down stuff for state records and things. And Greek philosophers were also slaves, and I do remember reading about them having been forced into becoming tutors to the sons of wealthy Romans, and having to collect the kid from school and being made to carry the kid's bag, satchel or whatever, tablets or something, which I guess were heavy. So Um,
So the word is
I
quite
mean,
emotive, isn't it? In today's vernacular, if you're saying the word slave, you're instantly thinking of a plantation and
picking cotton
lashings or
and
something.
being
Yeah,
whipped.
yeah.
And the thing is, they probably didn't whip them that much because, because whipping your slave would be like kicking your washing machine.
So, but if we take the idea of if my idea of Christianity is that it sublimated slavery effectively, and it did have the desired effect of stopping the rebellion and allowing wealthy European civilization to come into being. Can you now turn around and say, well, it was all misguided because it was, it's off the path of the true way, actually? In a sense, what slavery institution would you institute in its place? Would you go back to the older form of slavery where it was more explicitly slave and master?
Okay, my method of humane slavery would be a matter of just changing slightly the DWP and calling it the Department of Work, Pensions and Manumissions.
What a brilliant idea. Brilliant.
Yeah, because actually slavery is actually an opportunity to make contacts. Because if you're a really good slave, I mean, some of your master's associates and competitors might think, well, I'd like to hire him. I mean, there's people poach each other's employees as well. So
You're absolutely right. You couldn't run a prison if you didn't have good behavior clauses. I mean, that's the only thing that stops riots. Some people have to have that hope, and it's funny. You're right. You're absolutely right. In the Christian conception of slavery, there's no escape, is there? And of course, that leads to a feeling of despair and hopelessness.
And also, it makes the slave less efficient because they think, well, it's all the same whether I work hard or not. I'll just just do the bare minimum.
Yeah. And we've seen that in recent history with the Soviets and the way that effectively they were all put into a generalized prison. That's how I see it, by the Bolsheviks. And it didn't matter whether you did a good job or you didn't. There's no feedback. It's a bit like the NHS, isn't it? It doesn't matter whether there's absolutely nothing in this structure and system of the NHS to wind it towards being a better service. Kind of a mini communist state, isn't it?
Well, the thing is, workfare can only best be administered under slavery, because I mean the problem with with the welfare state is that you think, oh, we should just be paying people to stay at home and watch porn and daytime TV or whatever they like to do, and then you think, but actually it would be more expensive if you made them work, because then they would be reluctant and do things wrong, and it seems to be cheaper just to give them the money, and then you create a class of people who are the clients of the welfare state. You're creating a parasitic class, and then you raise the labor costs of people, because obviously if you're already in receipt of benefits, any employer would have to pay more than what you're receiving in benefits in order to work, to turn up at go on public transport and go to work every day. So I think slavery is a necessary institution, which the Americans and the British were wrong to abolish. But now now they've got the problem of the welfare state. I mean, will they admit that they were wrong? It's so obvious. Once you have determined causation.
So do you, like me, do you see that things are going to collapse? That we're going down this wrong track? It's not actually a sustainable track. It's taken a long time to break up, but you predict that it will, presumably.
Well, yes, because I've been saying this for so many years, and people, I mean, all they can do is pretend that they don't know what I'm talking about, or that I'm mad, and I mean, they seem to have no answer to it.
I bet you're constantly called crazy, right? Yeah.
Yes, but then I was comforted to know that Muhammad was accused of being a lunatic too. and oh yeah, and Jesus, and but yeah, people use that as a shorthand for we don't agree with you, and nobody does. I think that that's basically shorthand. But I think most of us are used, from childhood onwards, at being called mad, which seems to be synonymous with stupid, or nobody agrees with you, nobody looks at things this way.
Who are chosen as the masters of others in your program?
No, I'm saying, that there can be any kind of slave. You can be a banker slave. You can be an accountant slave.
Oh, I think they are already in all but name. I agree, but if it's made more explicit, though, that presumably that does imply a class of masters,
Well, the
doesn't it?
government would, you know, I mean the
But
whole
you would see
idea.
the boss of a company is still going to be a slave, as far as you're concerned.
Um,
That's probably right. I think everyone is a
well,
slave
it would
who's
be
in receipt of.
official. It would be
Mm,
official, right? It's like you're officially a slave because you're
yes,
entitled to manumission, and that's kind of you can't have one without being the other.
yes, yes.
But I mean, I don't see it as something necessarily, equivalent to death. I mean, it would just be a more efficient way of um, making the labor of Western nations more competitive. Because
When you
basically, you need to revive you a robust working class. Because there are lots of things that need to be done, and you can't just keep importing them. And anyway, they'd be happier, not having to come here.
can we not can we say that that our country, England, has undergone a series of deliberate social subversions, or do you just think it's because of the way that our beliefs, our arbitrary belief system has been set up, that we would naturally end up going this way of kind of disintegration? Or do you think there has been a subversive element actually militating for this breakup?
It's very hard to tell. You look at somebody doing something crazy, and I've been thinking, are they being evil, or are they being stupid, or are they just
Mm,
mad? And I thought that there's no point, breaking my head trying to work it out, because the consequence is the same. So if you do
mm,
this thing that, if you carelessly, fall off a tall building, you're just going to die when you hit the ground. And it doesn't matter whether, you thought you could fly and you fell over, or somebody pushed you.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's like you're just going to die when you hit the pavement. So let's discourage
I
this
just think
crazy, evil, stupid behavior.
I think my an avenue of inquiry I'm trying to establish, and one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you was to try to learn, because I've got so many gaps in the jigsaw. I haven't got a complete historical jigsaw yet, but I'm increasingly thinking that the world is kind of crazy at the moment. It's like a kind of I read an essay a 100 years ago written by Crowley talking about the world seems to be on the brink of becoming a ghetto world order. And I would say that 100 years later, it's all happened, and it is a ghetto world order. And what I mean by that is that it's so much of what's happened is due to shekel flow, that it's kind of a mindless game where currency is too predominant and not values. And
Sorry, what was
there
the
was a time,
shekel
the
currency flows?
Shackleverse. Yeah, yeah. I think that after the Protestant Revolution, the upshot of the Protestant Revolution, apart from when all the monasteries were flattened and everything else, was the financialization of everybody.
Easy and
Which
loose money.
yes, and but well, metering of people's time. Before that, you had craftsmen who would make something monumental, and they wouldn't care for the time. The object was to to make some astounding work. But it wasn't too fast forward just a few years on the other side of the Protestant Revolution. That sort of object would never be made again, because it would always have to have a budget associated with it, and an hourly rate.
Yes, I think under the Industrial Revolution, I did do I did study British social and economic history, and you know, there were the alienated proletariat who didn't have the satisfaction of making a whole thing. It was all, you know, doing some little
Production
thing.
line.
Yeah,
Yeah.
production line. So they never had the artisan's satisfaction of having, you know, created an object.
Yeah. Yes.
And
That was like huge, like a chopping everyone's hands off in a way from what it was to what it became. Yeah.
but you were saying something earlier, I think about Christianity, about you know, whether things were meant to happen, and I think there is a philosophical view that says that everything that happened was meant to happen, and there is a reason for it. You know, just because we haven't worked it out, or if we thought it was unfair, doesn't mean that there was, you know, no reason for it. And I would tend to agree in that you can work out what went wrong. You know, how
Well,
did
I'm
we get
wondering.
to where we are?
First of all, if we start with admitting that the patient is sick, we can start to think about remedies. But
Indeed.
step one is admitting that there's a sickness. But what I wonder, the remedies are either two things. It's either identify, and quite often illnesses come from parasitic infections. So it's either a parasite that needs to be disengorged, or it's like a temperamental thing. The patient has established bad habits. He's not doing things which are conducive to the long-term health. So he has to change his beliefs. And I don't know which of those two things is the problem. Maybe it's a combination of both.
Well, I mean, we have to define mental health, of course. So you know, is mental health merely neurosis, or is it unhappiness? But then, you know, maybe we ought to be sad when, you know, bad stuff happens. You know, if our
Absolutely.
marriage fails, if a, you know, loved one, you know, suddenly dies, um, if we, you know, if our business fails. So it would be, you know, odd if you started laughing, you know, when something terrible happens, and you know, but when it's shown in movies, it means that the person has gone mad. That's why they're laughing hysterically when they found out that, you know, or whatever, that, you know, something terrible has happened. So mental health, I guess, can be divided into two categories, which is depression and feeling suicidal, and then the other one is, you know, not being able to recognize reality. And you know, unfortunately, our governments, our ruling classes suffer from, you know, two kinds, right? I think that the people are mostly on psychotropic drugs, and it's normalized now. It's normalized to be on psychotropic drugs. So it means that, you know, if it doesn't hurt enough, we won't address the problem that is causing us psychic pain because we're on psychotropic drugs, right? So
Yeah,
really, pain and suffering is necessary to bounce us, to nudge us into fixing the problem.
completely. But yeah, under Soviet Russia, alcoholism rose enormously, and I'm of the opinion because my outlook is I'm a Thelemite. We could talk about what that means another time, hopefully. But we've got this idea that liberty isn't just like a nice to have; it's an essential part of being human. To be a sovereign, we've got so much ability as human beings that if we're not self-directed to the right degree, we're going to be made miserable. And if the spirit can't find freedom in in its mundane activity, then it will reach out for drugs and escape that way. It won't be defied.
Well, the metaphor of the road has been made for, you know, for life, right? You know, the
Mm,
path to life, and you know,
mm,
and and I think, you know, if people regard religion as a kind of safety rail, it's like, yes, you know, just stay on the path, because if you go, you know, off piste, you're going to hit the rocks. You know, it's that kind of idea. So people know when they, you know, stray off the path, you know, they might get lost, and you know, that sort of idea. So I think it's, you know, it's like, okay, you're driving, you want that line in the middle of the road, don't you? You want to be told which side of the road you're supposed to be driving on, don't you?
But in Christianity, there's a very important central tenet, which is that people should be free to go wrong and then repent, and then
Yeah,
they will be
but
forgiven.
surely
Which
as
suggests, well, it suggests that humans are fallible, can learn from their mistakes rather
yeah,
than
yeah, but don't you
facing
want to protect your
draconian
children?
consequences.
You know, I mean, I think government is in the kind of parental role. So obviously, you want your children to obey you and not do the things, and if they disobey, there's punishment and correction, you know, lessons to reinforce, um, your instructions. So I mean, all you can do is say this is the right thing and this is the wrong thing. Just like at school, and the consequences if you break the school rules. You know the consequences if you break the law. So obviously the laws should encourage, socially desirable behavior and discourage socially undesirable behavior. And
Said,
really, the people talk about good and evil. That's the quickest way to understand it. So what God commands is good, and what God forbids is evil. And then, which is which? Look at the book.
and if you stray, you're not necessarily talking about a huge investment in police officers standing at every corner, ensuring that there's right conduct. You're unless I'm misunderstanding you, I think you might be agreeing with me, the Catholic idea that if a sin comes with its own punishment, or that there's a
Yes, the
natural order
sin
to
is its
things.
own punishment.
Yes, yeah. I like
So
that idea. I think it's true.
yeah, so the sin of idolatry is its own punishment, as I think many people are discovering. Because why is idolatry? Why are the prohibitions of idolatry? Um, sorry, the first two commandments of the Ten Commandments is the prohibition against idolatry and blasphemy, and then all the others follow. But and I think the reason for it is if you obey the first and second commandment, you're less likely to sin with the others. But if you don't really believe, then you're just more likely to do
Is the
commit
money
the
system
others.
is the money system a form of idolatry? I mean, it wasn't too long ago that well, the idea of wealth. I mean, I'm still old-fashioned enough to believe that there are people who are rich, and whether they have money or not is a separate consideration. In fact, it's certain people will attract money, so they are wealthy people. It's not a function of how much money you've got. If you wire someone £1 million, they don't become rich. They just have a bank balance. I mean, that's just obvious, isn't it? So in the same way that money isn't actually a conveyor of very much, it's given too much credence and respect. Is that at the heart of idolatry, or vesting
Yes,
in?
I mean Christians are warned against worshipping Mammon, which is basically the god of materialism, the god of shopping.
Is the error of idolatry similarly wasteful, or how will you be how are Christians, do you see Christians being punished by their
Well,
conduct?
I think that they're being punished in that their status in their own white homelands is lower than that of Jews and Muslims. So I'm sure it is surprising,
Or you
and
mean
they think
they're
probably.
losing at the game of life, they're losing at the game of life right now, they're being broken up into poverty and disempowered naturally.
Um, yes, because their ruling classes don't believe in it; they only pretend to believe in it, and because
Yes.
their ruling classes don't believe in it, they show their contempt for it by elevating non-Christians over Christians.
Yes. But if how am I going wrong when I engage in idolatry? That's just the last thing. We had a lovely chat. We better wrap it up around about now because I've taken an hour of your time.
Um, well, it just means that you forego the um, being rightly guided by the Quran, and I think that is the most important thing. So opportunity cost is giving up something good, you know, and have and doing something that isn't quite so profitable. That I think is the basis of opportunity cost. So you can work out, you know, just by examining history, like this terrible thing happened, the European wars of religion, or the English Reformation, or whatever it is, you know, or the bloodshed, and you know. Uh, and you think, well, if you'd been following the Quran, would you have done it? And I think the answer is no. And I think even an amateur historian like me can actually trace a causation. Like, you know, bad stuff happened to you, and it's not just, you know, Christians. It's Jews and Muslims not, you know, breaking their own rules, and you know, it always turns out badly. It's like, well, you know, all these things, all these bad things happened to you because you broke the rules that you said you know you were supposed to be keeping as, you know, Jews or Christians or Muslims.
Right. Well, you're giving me quite a lot to think about because but there's a lot of dogma in what you're saying. I'm not sure if you're conscious of it, but when I ask you, you're quite good at coming back with with reasonable arguments. So I've really enjoyed this chat. It's gone so fast. I think we should do it
Yes,
again.
yes. So, and thank you so much for your very penetrating questions, and I really enjoyed answering them.
Brilliant. Oh, we'll talk again then, Claire.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. Bye.
Bye.
Hello, people in the chat who've probably gone, but let me see if there are questions. Okay, no questions for me to answer. So thank you all for listening.